Hey, this is Pete Brackey, author of Crystal Lake Memories. I'm here with Adam Marcus, director of Jason Goes to Hell.
Hello.
Here we are, we're in the 25th anniversary of the film, which came out, August 13th, 1993?
August 13th, 1993, which was 13 years after the original film had come out. So it was the 13th anniversary of the original Friday the 13th that we came out, and now we're in the 25th anniversary, which is terrifying because the movie is now older than I was when I made the movie.
How old were you when you made the movie?
I was hired for the job when I was 21. I started directing the film when I was 23, and the film came out just after I turned 25.
So this is actually the second commentary, correct?
This is the second commentary.
Yes.
The first commentary I did with my writing partner, Dean Laurie, who I'm credited with. I'm credited as writing the story. Dean's credited with the screenplay, along with Jay Hughley, for the movie itself. But yeah, so Dean and I did this when we did the first commentary. We did the commentary at a place called Margarita Mix, which is a place in Los Angeles where they would do these, literally they would do these commentary tracks for these movies, because they were going wild at the time. And the great thing about this, about what happened when we did that track, so Margarita Mix, the reason they called it that was because while you would do your commentary track, they would serve you margaritas. Or whatever libation you cared for. So I don't drink. I never have. So I was having Diet Coke at the time, and Dean was drinking. And Dean was getting slowly schnockered as we were doing the commentary track all afternoon. And it's hilarious because if you flip over to that commentary track at any point, you're going to hear Dean slowly get more and more funny and drunker as I'm sort of having fun at his expense while he's doing it. The other thing that was really cool about that commentary track is that in the middle of the track, we took a break. Right? They had us take a break, and we all got up and stretched, whatnot. And somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, I have a note for you from the person doing commentary track in the next studio." And I was like, "Oh, cool, yeah." So it hands me the note, and it says, "Hey, I love your movie, Penny Marshall." And Penny Marshall was doing the commentary track for A League of Their Own next door and loved Jason. I was like, Penny Marshall loves Jason Goes to Hell? So I wrote her back a note, sent it back, that said, "Thank you so much, Penny. I love all your movies, Adam Marcus." So it was, no, that was actually really exciting. Dean and I both were like, did that really? And it was funny because Dean ended up working at one point with Gary Marshall. And
That's
he
right.
worked with Ron Howard, of course, which that they're all sort of mishpucha. So, yeah.
But we have no margaritas here, I should
No
say.
margaritas. No, I have a lovely Starbucks iced tea. That's what I'm.
So the opening of this movie, it's in a way, it's an entire Friday the 13th movie compressed into an opening.
Yes.
And then you kind of get to go off and do your own kind of movie. Could you talk a little bit about what your intentions were for that?
Well, I can tell you what we wanted to do with the first movie, and it was also one of those moments when Sean let me hire the actress I really wanted to have in this section. Kane Hodder introduced me to Julie Michaels, who I adore, and oh, she's so cute. Oh my God.
Isn't she blonde in real life too?
what?
Is she blonde in real life?
She's blonde. She's actually a stunt coordinator, one of the top stunt coordinators in town right now. Her and her husband Pee Wee, who I believe they met during this movie and have been together ever since. They do like a ton of television series now, do all the stunt coordinating on it. Anyway, Julie and I are still friends, and I just adore her. She's just a sweetheart. She's gorgeous. I mean, she's stop a clock gorgeous. And so she was sort of, I wanted to find the most kind of stunning, attractive girl I could find to be sort of the final girl for this tiny little Friday the 13th movie that started the movie. And I will say, you know, credit where credit is due. Our armorer on this movie is a guy named Louis Abernathy. And Lou Abernathy wrote and directed, or co-wrote and directed, House 4 for Sean Cunningham. This a year earlier than this. And by the way, that was my first job with Sean when I got out of film school, was I was a PA on that movie for Louis. Louis came in and we were all sort of workshopping ideas for the script and whatnot. And Louis was actually the one who originally thought, how cool would it be if we blew up Jason, right? That was sort of like, that was actually his brainchild. And so we started developing this idea, and I said, well, what I would love to do an 8-minute sequence at the beginning of the film that is an entire Friday the 13th film, all of the tropes, all the gags in one shot. So I developed this idea where she would do all of the things that, you know, a young woman should never do in a Friday the 13th movie. Go into the woods alone, go to a scary looking cabin alone, replace light bulbs for no apparent reason, go to a creepy little shed to get the light bulb, go, of course, take a shower because she's so sweaty from changing the light bulb. And you'll see, like, as she ducks, as she moves, there's all these dead spaces in the background. And I had a wonderful cinematographer on this movie, Bill Dill, who was my first and only choice for the movie. He was the only guy I wanted. And Bill was extraordinary in really giving me darkness in the movie. And not milky darkness, but actual, like, really dark areas of the frame. So that I could always have that potential sense that something's hiding in the dark. Something's going to come out of that darkness. Because, look, let's be honest, you know, the Friday the 13th movies are basically Jaws movies. It's a shark in the water. And so I wanted as much water on screen. I wanted as much of my space to be taken up like an ocean. Jimmy Gleason. So by the way, this is this entire group of military paratroopers here. That is almost exclusively made up of my prop department, because we had extras on this scene, and the extras were SAG extras being paid a full wage, and we wanted them to wear, you know, all this kind of gear and put face paint on and hold guns. And I was trying to give, like, these extras, like, the best day of their lives. Like, let's really have fun. Like, you don't just have to just be an extra today. You're going to have a good time. And by the way, those are electric guns that Louis Abernathy brought. So when we did all of this, the extras started to try to, like, unionize on the set into their own little union, and were getting pissed that they weren't getting all kinds of bumps for holding the guns and having face paint. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? And Sean was getting, like, furious, right? He's like, you got to be kidding me. Stephen Williams. Just going to take a moment and just glory at his gloriousness. So here's the thing. We sent them home. We paid the extras and we sent them home. And next thing you know, prop guys, put on this stuff. And you've never seen a crew more happy to jump in front of the camera and have a good time. Like, they were just in heaven being able to do that. So I always love that I get to watch half my crew in that scene. Like, it's just so much more fun for me.
So how did you approach the continuity with the other films? Because if I'm not mistaken, you basically ignore Part 8.
Yeah, that was actually told to me. I had no choice over Part 8. And look, there are things in Part 8 that are really terrific, and the idea of Jason in Manhattan is such a good idea. And I remember that ad campaign being, like, the single best ad campaign of all of these movies. The problem is that movie really isn't about that. It's about Jason taking a boat ride. And for my money, my biggest problem with that film is that the only character that you remember from Part 8 is Jason. That's it. And so the movie also was, for Paramount, a bit of an embarrassment. And it's really the reason they relinquished the rights to New Line, was because of Part 8. So when Sean talked to me about doing this film, the whole idea was, get the hockey mask out of the movie and forget Part 8 ever happened. Like, keep it at Crystal Lake. And I was like, okay. And it was not something that, like, was hard for me to do, because I wasn't attached, as a fan, I wasn't as attached to Part 8 as I was the rest of the movies. Yeah.
It's an interesting credit sequence too, because it's most of the other Fridays, I think up until Part 8, basic white title lettering. So it's kind of one of your conception for this, the way you move the camera in and out of the credits. It's kind of cool.
Well, I wanted the look. I love credit sequences. I think that I hate when credits are a time killer in a movie and a way to sort of, like, you know, up the running time of a film. I wanted the credits to be part of the story and part of the movie, and also that you would actually pay attention to the people that are in this film or worked on this film, as well as getting story throughout. And so for me, I wanted the movie. I wanted this film to feel artistic. Sorry for the gross word, but I did. I wanted it to have a filmmaker's touch or style to it. And the problem with a lot of the Friday the 13th movies is that style seemed to take a back seat to, you know, how many boobies can we have and how much blood can we let? Which, by the way, God bless boobies and blood. I'm all about it. But for me, I was like, let's make this different. Like everything about Jason Goes to Hell, for what I wanted to do as a filmmaker, I wanted everything to be different and to have a signature. And even if someone doesn't like the signature, that's fine. But I wanted people to feel like there's a filmmaker here. So this whole idea of constantly going in and out of darkness, which the movie, you know, originally the original title of the movie was Friday the 13th, The Heart of Darkness. And the reason it was called that is because I was 22 when I was writing it, and I'm horribly pretentious. And when Orson Welles was 22, he started working on his first screenplay for Joseph Campbell's The Heart of Darkness, which ended up being Apocalypse Now many, many decades later. And so I wanted, you know, Wells was going to direct that film when he was 23. I was directing this when I was 23. So in this horribly pretentious thing, I was naming my movie after an Orson Welles dream project. And it also happened to be about The Heart of Darkness. So everything about it kind of worked. So I wanted this sense of darkness, this sense of going into this inky world of absolute black that would feel dangerous. Again, like I said earlier about the shark in the water, it was this whole idea of constantly diving into this darkness. So that was kind of, you know, part of what I was going for here. Also, I wanted there to be a really clear sense of humor. And, you know, I mean, this is a perfect example of like a guy who, you know, talk about a brilliant actor who can really, who created a great sense of humor with me for the top of the film and was really into the whole idea of like, you know, you're gonna, yes, it's a horror movie, but you're gonna be funny, and we're allowing you to be funny. And again, then, you know, Dean Lorey enters the movie, you know, in a couple seconds after this sequence, and talk about bringing a sense of humor to the movie. I mean, he's like Woody Allen suddenly walks in as the coroner's assistant.
And that was back when he had hair too, Dean.
The what?
That was back when Dean had hair.
Yes, yes. It is a coiffed Dean Lorey, which is extraordinary. I remember when Dean and I were living together when we were making this movie. At one point, he came into my bedroom one morning and looked at me and said, "Dude, I gotta find a wife because I'm gonna be like bald tomorrow." And so, and by the way, Dean found his wife, who he is still with to this day, on this movie, Elizabeth Laurie, who was the set dresser on this film, and she's an amazing woman, and they're an incredible couple, been together for 28 years now. So yeah,
sounds like a lot of people met on this movie, huh? Couples were formed.
A lot of couples. Yes, it's true. It's true. This is one of those rare moments where people act and they stayed together. Greg Nicotero met his first wife on this movie. She was the costumer.
Oh.
Yeah. No, we had a lot of hookups. We did. It was kind of nice. I did not. However, I did not. My wife ends up. I met her months after I finished shooting, and she ended up doing all of the women, heavy breathing, screaming, running, falling. My wife Deborah is the voice of all of those things in this movie.
So they're still connected. So she still kind of met her in this area.
I absolutely did. Yeah. I met her during post.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
So I'm trying to imagine, I'm 23 years old. You get handed a Friday the 13th film. I mean, it seems like a lot of pressure. When you're sitting down, you're kind of crowd. Okay, what I want my film to be. Mm-hmm. What I think is really cool is we're in 1993. We had 8 other movies about teenagers. The audience watching these movies has grown up.
Yeah.
They're going into adulthood. So can you talk just a little bit about creating a real community and a real sense of adult characters, just kind of what you want in the world today?
Sure. Well, the fact that I was in my early 20s and when the first movie came out, I was 12. Yeah. Or not even. I was 11 when it came out. And the thing is that I felt like, okay, so if I was the audience for the first movie, if I was part of that audience, the audience for the first movie has now grown up, and we are in our 20s. And I went, okay, there's so... Oh, yeah, there it is. There it is. So,
yes.
So good and disgusting. By the way, this was also the moment... Look, I'd already blown Jason up at this point, but this was the moment where I wanted people to go, oh, we're with a dangerous filmmaker. Like, this guy's not making my daddy's Friday the 13th. This is nuts. And the movie really announces itself here, and great visual effects by Al Magliochetti, who, back then, there was no digital, like, we're going to draw some stuff on a computer. He had to hand draw every one of those demons. It's an extraordinary piece of animation. Anyway, I wanted the movie to be full of adult characters because I felt like the audience for these films has grown up. There was something to me that was just sort of a little creepy about adults kind of watching these teenagers go into the woods, getting drunk, smoking weed, and then getting murdered. And I was like, there's something like gross about that now. So I was like, I'm more interested in horror films, quite frankly. Let's say like The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby or The Omen, where the horror isn't really the story. The story is there's a world that's happening and something comes into that world. There's a cockroach on the carpet. How does everybody deal with that? But the horror should interrupt people's lives, not be the story. And so for me, the idea of this shark in these waters, also, look, there's a logic thing to Jason Goes to Hell, which I know a lot of fans hate logic, but I don't. There's a logic to this movie in that the opening of the film is, okay, Jason Voorhees has murdered over 100 people in the first 8 movies. And I'm putting his mom's count into that as well, and Roy's count into that. Let's throw Roy's death count in there too. Yeah. Okay, so there is a mass murderer working in a very tiny area of New Jersey. I'm sorry, that's not a local law enforcement issue anymore. That's the feds. Like, you bring the feds in on. That's the biggest serial killer in the history of planet Earth, and no one's going to bring the feds in. So the movie starts from that idea. Like, let's actually say they know they have this problem. The feds come in to do something, and I loved Kane being one of the feds and then getting freaking murdered by himself, which is awesome. By the way, for anybody who gets pissed off about this movie not having enough of the Jason in it, here's the thing: when the coroner, who is now possessed by this, when he crosses that room and crosses in front of that refrigerator, there's Jason. He's in the whole movie. And that was sort of to point out to the audience, Jason hasn't left this film. It's still Jason. He's just wearing a different mask. So what people are missing is a hockey mask. They're not missing Jason. Jason's in the whole movie. There's nary a scene without Jason in it. But it's this idea of the hockey mask that people fell so in love with, which I think is such a mistake. Because if all the character is the hockey mask, well, then make a movie about a wrestling match.
You know, it's funny. 'Cause this is what my life is like. I actually timed the amount of Jason in some of these movies. There's more on-screen Jason in this movie than Part 3, for example. You don't see Jason at all in Part 3 for like 50 minutes.
I know. I know. And it's crazy making because, again, look, whenever I talk to people who don't like Jason Goes to Hell, and listen, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and God bless them. I'm cool with that. And if someone just doesn't like the movie or thinks the movie's shitty or that, cool. But when I talk to people who don't dig the movie, I always kind of take them step by step through it. By the way, how do you not like a movie with this amazing African American cowboy in the? Come on, man! I put that guy in the movie. Anyway, the thing is that I take them step by step and I go, okay, so do you like the way Jason looks in the movie? Oh yeah, dude, badass! Like one of the best Jason looks there is. Okay. Do you think the kills are good? Oh, some of the best in the series. Like, and that girl with the tent. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy, man. Okay, so you like the gore. Okay. Do you like the acting in the movie? Yeah, no, everybody's really, they're good. Like, you like Creighton Duke. Oh, he's like one of the best characters you ever put in the front. Okay. So what you don't like is that the hockey mask isn't in every other scene. That's the problem. Yeah. And again, there are people who, over time, who've watched this movie, dozens of times, even though they hate it, which always cracks me up. I hate your movie. How many times have you seen it? 20. Yeah. Do you own it on Laserdisc? Well, of course. Blu-ray? I still have my VHS copy. I'm like, Here's the thing. Over time, I think people start to realize what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I think our audience that appreciates it has grown exponentially simply because they see that what I was doing was not denigrating the fans by any means. I'm a giant fan of these movies. I I'm honoring my audience by going, I think you deserve more. I think you deserve better than the same movie you've been fed so many times.
I mean, and is it fair to say? I mean, you're always going up against expectations, right? When you make a franchise film, but I mean, in a way, 1993, you can't do the same thing over. You couldn't do another.
No.
You had to move this forward somehow.
Well, if it was just a stock and kill movie, literally no one would have seen it. No one would have cared. And you know, again, I think sequels, you get to a play. I mean, the great thing about Jason Goes to Hell is it's the first Friday the 13th movie with no part number after it. In fact, 13 doesn't even appear in the title, mostly because Paramount wouldn't let us have it. That is true. We could not call it Friday the 13th. We were not allowed. Jason was fine. We could say Jason. We couldn't say Friday the 13th. There were a lot of rules about what we could have, what we couldn't have, because originally I wanted the lead male in the movie to be Tommy. The Steven character was Tommy Jarvis. And Paramount would not let us have it. We did not buy Tommy Jarvis. We bought Jason. So I wanted to connect it even further to the other films that way. So when you watch the movie, Stephen Freeman is Tommy Jarvis. I just wasn't allowed to do it. But look, you know, when you think of, let's say, Ethel, who's a fan favorite, right? Well, that's what I'm trying to give them. I'm trying to give them connective tissue. I was just doing it with a cast that, look, I spent months casting this movie. This wasn't like I went out and just picked a quick cast. The people in this movie were deliberately chosen over an extraordinary amount of time. And our casting directors were Broadway casting directors. Barry Moss is, you know, I mean, he's a legend, actually. And getting people like Erin Gray, I had to sit and talk with Erin Gray for 2 hours to convince her to do the movie. And at one point, the way I got Erin, for example, was... I said, I don't want you to be dolled up in this movie. Like, I'm not going to make you a glamour puss in this movie. I said, I feel like that's how everybody else has treated you in your work, that you're a model first and an actress second. I won't do that. I said, I think you're a terrific actor. And I want you for your acting, not because you're beautiful. That's there. That's in evidence. But I wanted to give her a chance to really do the work she deserves to do. And she did not disappoint. She is so... Look, next to her is Billy Greenbush, who... This is a guy from Five Easy Pieces. I mean, this is top shelf casting. Stephen Williams, truly one of the best actors I've ever worked with in my lifetime. The guy is... He can turn any sentence into magic. John LeMay, literally, I had to have conversations with John LeMay where I was going, listen, John, I want the character to be more like John McClane, not so much like Hamlet. Because John was so committed as an actor, he was like all about the inner angst of the character. He was so studious in his approach. He was so brilliant that there were times when I had to go, dude, you're acting too well. You got to dumb this down a little bit, man. You're the hero of a Friday the 13th movie, you know? The soup to nuts, I wanted the movie to be populated by real people, by people that you felt you could relate to. Allison Smith, who I saw as a child as Annie on Broadway. Who had been working truly from the time she was like 11 right up to where we were working here together, then went on to the West Wing and other incredible things. I'm Stephen Culp, who who ended up in Angels in America and
13 Days.
And 13 Days. And I mean, these are extraordinary performers. The fact that, Leslie Jordan is in there, who is now an A-list television actor, and Rusty Schwimmer, who quite frankly, now the thing about Rusty Schwimmer, this is actually really cool about her casting. So Rusty Schwimmer was, she came in to read for the character that Leslie Jordan played. Because Joey B was supposed to be a man originally, and it was written for Joe Bologna. That's why it got called Joey B. That's who I wanted. Okay, Joe Bologna was not having anything to do with the Friday the 13th movie, but that's who I wanted, right? Yeah. So that was the guy it was based on. So when Rusty came in to read for us, she was so brilliant as the wife of Joey that I was like, okay, you got the part. I said, you got the part. Here's the thing. I didn't have a reader for the afternoon to read with the other actors. So I said, look, can you read the Joey B part opposite the other women that are coming in to read for your part, you got the role. You booked it. You're done. Like, you got it. Just could you help me out? And she was so excited that I booked her in the room, that she was like, anything you want, sweetie, whatever you need. So she starts reading the Joey B character opposite these other women, and as she's reading it, I kept like, wait a minute, what? That's great. Wow, Rusty, that's awesome. Okay. By the time we finished the day, I turned to my casting people. I said, I'm switching the genders. She's got to be the one running this place. And I turned to her. I said, "You got the better part. You're Joey B." And then I met Leslie Jordan when I wanted her to have a husband, because I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this gender flop on this thing, right? Then I want a guy that is the exact opposite of Rusty. I want someone really small and kind of sweet and just this kind of just this little kind of jumping jack of a man, right? And Barry Moss was like, then there's only one person you should meet. And so I jumped in with Leslie Jordan. The casting on these three, by the way, is fascinating, because this scene was shot months after production.
There was a test screening, correct?
Yes, this was after test screening. One of the only complaints we got was that they wanted more teenagers by the lake. So we're like, okay, we will manufacture some teenagers by a lake. And so David Giella, who was Barry's casting associate on the movie, David ran an acting class, and he brought in a bunch of these younger people who were in his acting class that he'd been working with for a while that were really tremendous actors. So I met all these three kids, irrespective of each other. And when I say kids, they were my age. But so I met the three of them, and I cast them. Well, when we got to set, Michelle Clooney and Michael Silver looked at each other and kind of freaked out, because they had lived together for years prior to us shooting this, had broken up and had been apart a year at that point. So the chemistry between the two of them in this movie, I didn't have to work. It was the easiest day as a director I've ever had, because I didn't have to manufacture any of it. Catherine Atwood, who's this young woman right here, one of the kindest, sweetest actors I've worked with. She's to this day, we're still friends, and she's such a doll. She's just such a good person. I gotta say that these three actors, I mean, they it's so funny. I only got to work with them for a couple of days. I'm still close friends with all of them. Like, I love these people. They are absolutely magnificent actors. And Michael, like most of the men I got naked in this movie, was so thrilled to be naked. Yet dudes never have a problem dropping trout. They never do. I had a guy who's in some of the cut footage that I think we're going to talk about later, a guy named Jonathan Penner, who gets killed in this movie. He played Allison Smith's boyfriend in the movie. And we cut his scene, ultimately. Jonathan and I are still close friends. I adore Jonathan. Him and his wife, Stacy Tidal, they wrote and directed one of my favorite movies, The Last Supper, which is extraordinary. And they just did The Bye-Bye Man about a year and a half ago. And Stacy is actually very ill. She has ALS now. Was diagnosed with it about a year ago, and so they've been battling that together. But Jonathan Penner, who became like a huge for people who are Survivor fans, he's one of the most seen Survivors. He's been on 4 seasons of Survivor. He's like a champion on that show, and a screenwriter and an actor. And I mean, he's my kind of guy, just jack of all trades. And but Jonathan was another one of these guys that like. He walked on set, dropped his pants so fast. I was like, well done, sir, but we're good. No, don't face the camera. Can't have any angry pickle in the movie. We're good. But the men were really cool about dropping. By the way, so were the women. But it was so women will be more kind of demure about it. They'll make sure the set is cleared, all that. Sure. Dudes, they just don't care.
Is it awkward shooting scenes like this?
Horrible. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. I don't understand directors that like enjoy it. It's the worst. And here's the thing: you want it to have look, especially a scene like this, you want it to be sort of sexy and titillating and all of that, and that's fine. But it's truly, and it's why I was so blessed to have 2 people that already had chemistry, so they were comfortable with each other. So I didn't have to create that for them. But it is so embarrassing to be clothed with these naked people in front of your camera. And it's so technical and awful. And like you're directing them how to kiss. Oh, stop. It's so bad. But it's part of the job description. I always love when people think like, oh, that's going to be hot. It's like, no, there's nothing hot about it. It's terrible.
Also, people forget that like Michelle Clooney had to go through a whole body cast,
Full
naked.
body cast.
Yeah, I mean,
and in a and I had to be there for it. I was there for it because I had to pose her in her moment. So that's really awkward when there's a naked girl on the floor of a warehouse in Chatsworth, ironically the porn capital of planet Earth, and literally there are 5 hulking, KNB effects dudes slapping alginate on her as fast as they can before it can dry. But again, Michelle could not have been more of a trooper and more awesome. And I mean, again, I was blessed with my cast. And look, I didn't even touch on the fact that, one of my best friends from childhood, literally from the time I was 8 years old, Adam Cranner, is one of the leads of the movie, plays Ward, the son of the Diner Runners. But also, my younger brother, Kip Marcus, is, he plays Officer Randy Parker. Again, I didn't cast them because they were my buds. I cast them because they're terrific performers. So I was just really blessed when it came down to who was in the movie. Richard Gant is going to come in again in a second to murder these people. And again, Richard is, most people think of him as Rocky V. He's the Don King character in Rocky V. But he is just a storied, tremendous character actor. So there were no shortcuts with the casting on this thing. It really wasn't. And it's funny because originally, Creighton Duke was not going to be played by Stephen Williams. Creighton Duke was being played by John Rubinstein, of Pippin fame. Brilliant New York Broadway actor. And his agent convinced him in the last minute not to do the movie. Kill your career doing a Friday 13th movie. And
so for how different it is now,
It's and by the way, and I think it works better because I think Stephen was more the right. Stephen has a playfulness about him. Stephen Williams is such a playful actor in that he's unafraid to do things that most actors would be afraid to kind of play with, themes and ideas that he and I would have a conversation and he would just there's a very kind of naughty side to me where I want to be a provocateur and I do want to push buttons. And Steven's exactly the same way. So the two of us would get each other going. And the next thing you know, the prison scene is this kind of homoerotic exchange, which is making every guy in the audience nervous, which I go to many times in this movie.
Was that ever? Yeah, some of the scenes, like the shaving scene, of course, is probably the most famous one.
Yes.
And it really creates a sense of ill at ease. Was there ever a concern or worry about how do you keep the audience on track with what's going on the screen and keeping the story not going too far off where you're just doing stuff just to get a reaction?
The great thing about horror movies and why my 3 favorite types of movies, and this is just true. This is just who I am. Horror movies, comedies, and musicals. I know that sounds nuts that those 3 things would be, but if you look at my first film, or the first film I helped produce, My Boyfriend's Back, which was originally called Johnny Zombie, that movie originally was a horror comedy musical. Okay, Disney cut the musical out, then cut most of the horror out, and then there was a little comedy left. But that's where my brain goes. The reason for that, those are the only 3 genres of film where you can stop the plot for a thing to happen. So horror, you can stop the plot for a scare. You can have a 15-minute scare sequence that really has nothing to do with the plot. But if it's scary, you're allowed to have it. The same with comedy. You always stop for a gag. And the same with musicals. Stop for a song, we're going to go for it. Now, if those things can be on the plot, all the better. So we did keep, like the homoerotic shaving scene. I knew my audience was never going to be afraid of Jason slashing someone to pieces. That's over. It's sort of like once Stanley Kubrick opened up the elevator doors, blood was ruined for all filmmakers because how are you going to go bigger than that? You can't. So for me, it was like, okay, that's not scary. So what's scary to my audience? Who's my audience and what's actually going to terrify them? Oh, I know. And it's amazing because the number of people who will interview me to this day, and the first question out of their mouths is, okay, so what's up with the homoerotic shaving sequence? And my response is always the same. I always say, because I knew 25 years later you'd ask me that question. I knew it.
Oh yeah, you totally remember that. I mean, it's
You remember that
yeah,
scene.
yeah.
There's no way not to. So for me, look, Jason Goes to Hell is one of those movies that even the people who don't like it remember it forever. Like I've left a mark on them, and I'm very proud to have left that psychic scar.
Well, it sounds like like something like John LeMay. It's not something where you have to fight with your actors. Like they just kind of go with you on that.
Yes.
So, I trust what.
Oh
You're
yeah.
going for.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing about the again with the acting on the film, because that's the world I came out of. Like there are people who say people who were raised by wolves. I was raised by choreographers, and so I had this troupe of performers around me all the time when I was growing up, including my family, and so I have a great love and respect for the craft of acting. It's one of the things that I hold dearest. And to this day, for the last 22 years now, I've been teaching 2 acting classes a week. Even when I'm shooting movies, I'll take a hiatus and then come right back to it. But I have to work with actors because they're the bravest, most extraordinary people ever, and they're lunatics. They're all nuts. But that's what I love about them is that sense of childlike lunacy that they bring to things. And it's why my life is so fun is because of them. They're amazing. And so before this movie, and I think it's the only Friday the 13th movie that has this distinction, I worked with my actors for 3 weeks. We rehearsed the scenes. We did theater games and trust exercises about what we were going to shoot. So, oh yeah. By the way, cheapest effect of the movie.
It works though.
And it totally works. And when you hear that crunch noise, people lost their minds. That is a rolled up piece of foam because I ran out of money for a budget. Yes, there it is.
I know.
There's the bane of my existence, the misspelled
Employees.
mailbox. And I love when people are like, that's Marcus's fault.
Yeah.
You're right. That's my fault. I actually painted that mail. That's the
handcrafted
job of
that
the director.
sign.
The job of the director is you do all of the spelling on set. That's what happens. I do love this shave and a haircut. God bless him. And that's Andy Block, who is also who's an acting teacher as well, who's a remarkable performer. And again, look at the trust, man. Like like I said to him, I said, "You're gonna be tied to this table naked," and he was like, "Okay." I mean, we didn't have to negotiate over it. It was like, that's the gig.
And how much of this stuff that comes out of the script, and how much do you invent, or as you're shooting, go, I have this idea, I have that idea,
I will say, look, I mean, there were definitely things that were spur of the moment, but for the most part, almost everything is in the script. We Dean and I look, and it was funny because Dean had pretty much the same kind of sixth sense of humor that I have. In fact, we used to call Dean the love child of George Romero and Walt Disney, because that's sort of like his sensibilities are kind of range in that area.
Yeah.
I think the George Romero part of him is left, and he's more in the Disney side now. But I will say, we wanted there to be again this comic unease in the movie. So wherever I could put in something that was gallows humor, we jumped in with that. So a lot of this stuff. Now, this was an additional piece of photography that happened. And by the way, the guy in the mirror there, not the one who was just talking to Stephen Culp, in that mirror was Sam Mahoney. That was our first AD. Yeah, who's to this day the best first AD I ever worked with. Great guy.
Well, I remember
Amazing.
Stephen Culp told me that you created a real sense of an acting commune on the set, and like you said, not to denigrate anyone else, but the Friday the 13th series is not known for acting generally.
Right.
So this is really, I think, the first movie where I feel like if you take the horror out of it, the movie can still exist.
That was the idea. That was the idea. And again, it goes right with my concept of I want there to be a story. The fact that this movie is about this young man who has gotten this girl pregnant, doesn't know he got her pregnant. Doesn't know. She disappears, has this baby. This guy finds out he's got a kid in the movie. I mean, it's kind of an extraordinary, soap opera plot at the very least. And you got this town with all these kind of interconnected characters. Oh, there's Jason again. There's some hockey mask. A lot of hockey mask in this scene. And again,
more than some of the other movies, you don't see the hockey mask. Again, some other movies for longer than this. But
And by the way,
I think it's all psychological. People, if they know, Jason's not in the movie or it's whatever, they think he thinks there's must have.
But look, the other part of it is K&B and most specifically Bob Kurtzman and Howard Berger, because they were the guys and John Bisson, who's an amazing artist. they created such a beautiful makeup for Jason. I mean, the concept of it, you know, Bob and I, when we first started talking about it, it was like this idea of like the mask has been there so long that now his face is encroaching in on the mask, that the flesh is actually growing around the mask. There is such a remarkable attention to detail in that makeup. And by the way, Carl Buchler, who we just lost, who did an unbelievable makeup on Seven. I mean, that is an incredible piece of artistry. For me, it was like, okay, I'm not going to do what he did. Like, I don't want to step on that because that's such a singular, brilliant thing. So it was really about let's try to create something even like the further evolution of that idea, right?
Because it does go around 8 because 8.
Yes.
Yeah.
8. It's like they ignore what happened in 7. So I'm like, well, okay, then.
You can see it very clearly. You look at this movie, you see the connection from 7 to in terms of Jason. Definitely.
Yes. And so for me, you know, I wanted to show that makeup as often as I possibly could. So having this idea, there it is again, of the reflective, you know, that Jason is always there. Yeah. I also wanted to remind the audience, it's still Jason. That's Jason.
Is this the first time in any Friday the 13th movie that Jason's seen his reflection?
It's the first time that he recognizes himself, I think. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was thinking of like a cat who, you know, when the cat sees himself in the mirror, like,
right.
Wow, I'm a cat.
Well, I also wanted it to be that he still recognizes that he's underneath this mask, that he's underneath that skin. And again, when you just look at all the... Okay, behind Erin Gray, if you watch, there is blood pouring out of her back, and that pool is getting bigger and bigger underneath her on that carpet. That's the movie I made. Like... every artist who worked on this film, they were working overtime. Like, everybody on set felt like we were doing something really cool. It didn't feel like a job. I mean, K&B had already done 100 movies at this point. And they went over budget on this movie, and they didn't charge us for it. I mean, Greg Nicotero was ready to kill Bob, which I totally understand. Greg was the most responsible of that bunch, you know, from that standpoint. And that, by the way, that's my ode to Halloween.
I was going to say,
absolutely.
Very Halloween. I love
that
it.
is right out of Halloween. But you know, this is this scene in general shows you the level of commitment from everybody involved in this movie, because they're doing something that has a real life to it. There's an honesty to this. It's also the first time I ever duvetined a house to be able to shoot day for night. So that was kind of exciting.
Was there any struggle, like, whether from the studio or the producers? Because you really go really far with the effects in terms of there's creatures and so many other things outside of the Friday the 13th realm. Was that a struggle or a battle for you to get that kind of stuff in it, or
to go with creatures,
or just, you know, kind of expand it beyond just?
I think what happened was Sean really liked the body jumping concept. He was into that. So was New Line. And I think the fact that they were all on board with that opened the door so wide for me to kind of jump through and go a little nuts. And then, you know, I remember Sean Cunningham at one point when we were doing the additional shoots, where we came up with the whole split the girl up the middle gag, which, you know, for me is my favorite kill in the entire Friday the 13th franchise. And by the way, my film is not my favorite film in the Friday the 13th franchise. Part 6 is my favorite film. Okay? So I'm not that guy, but that kill, sorry, we win. Jason Goes to Hell wins on that one. Bob Kurtzman, yay. Here's the thing. When we came up with the whole split the girl up the middle thing, Sean Cunningham came in, saw what we were drawing and designing and coming up with. And he walked in and he said, "It's like two kids in a sandbox." Now, he said it in a really negative, awful way. But the truth is that he's right. That's what was so glorious about making this thing, was that the lunatics started running the asylum. And we started making artistic choices that just felt, you know, they felt real to what we were trying to create. You know, they felt like these are honest choices that seem nuts, but that make sense in the world of what we're building. And that's what was so exciting about the movie.
It's interesting to me because, you know, it's 1993. I really feel like this film is a precursor in many ways. When Scream came along, the idea of now there's a real community with real people that feel like they actually interact with each other.
Yes.
And then the Scream characters, they graduate to college and things. But you have a final girl here who's a mom and
Yep.
an adult.
Yep.
So it's how you came about conceiving that and going in that direction.
Here's the thing. I was raised by a single mother. I think most of the people of my generation had that experience or something close to it. Again, we had so many final girls that were girls, right? Which is awesome. And look, Amy Steele all day long. And I love the women of these movies. But for me, I kept going like, can I have somebody who has more substance than I'm a counselor at a camp? I just wanted to have a woman who actually was a woman. Now, by the way, I was fully aware that I'm in some ways desexualizing her by making her a mother. That's not, our brains didn't go there then, That being said, Carrie was, she's a lovely looking woman and she was a terrific actor. And she pulled it off. I mean, she was able to give me sort of that Linda Hamilton thing. Also, look, this movie is as much a child of the Terminator and Aliens as it is of the Friday the 13th franchise. Like, I was, let's be honest, as a filmmaker, guys like James Cameron or John Carpenter were turning me on in things that were horror adjacent, And it also made me see women that way. Like, I wanted women. Look, I mean, Vicky, for example, okay? So here you got this girl, she's a waitress at a diner, right? She's the secondary girl, right? She's the one who picks up a double-barreled shotgun and starts blowing people away. The dudes aren't doing that. That's the girls. So I wanted this movie to be about, honestly, not to be about girls, to be about women. And I saw strong women in my life. I wanted the movie to reflect what I had seen in my life. The guy, my final guy, is the one who's struggling with all these inner demons and his feelings and all that stuff. And that's usually what's given to the woman in this movie. So I kind of flipped it a little bit and went, I'd rather have the guy be the sensitive one and the one who, let's be honest, has to man up to go after the demon and save his family. But it's the women who hold all the power. This character can only help the woman get to the finale. He can't kill Jason. Only she can kill Jason. The women have the power in this movie. And Creighton Duke is fully aware of that. That's why this scene happens.
Well, it's really interesting, watching it again now, because if you look at his arc,
yes,
it really is about an immature guy who learns how to be a man.
Yep.
And the women make him have to be a man. That's what this movie is really about.
That's what the movie's about.
Yep.
The women and one really badass motherfucker.
Yeah. And then it's interesting because a year later, you have Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which is all about a mother. And so you're definitely part of kind of a new era of graduating the slasher film into adult.
Absolutely. Well, that was the hope. Yeah. And again, I didn't know I was part of an era, quite frankly, at that time.
Well, you don't know at the time.
I wanted to make. But no, you're right. That was my thinking. And look, I mean, by the way, this is hands down my favorite scene in the entire movie. Like, I love
this scene.
It's
very affectionate and cute.
Right? Isn't that beautiful? The way he... And again, when Steven and I, when we were talking about the scene, he took my hand in the way that, and I was like, this is so good, dude. I'm like, it's so like, you're making me nervous, which is awesome. Like, again, this is what great actors get you. And for some reason, there was a period of time where, again, like you said, acting became less important to horror movies. I think there's nothing worse than putting acting as something in the background of these movies. I think the reason Halloween is so good, the first movie, is because Jamie Lee Curtis is so good in that movie. And Donald Pleasance is so good in that movie. You have heroes that you're rooting for because they feel like real people. They're people you understand and that you recognize. That's what I wanted this movie to have. I wanted it to have great performances. And again, there are so many good actors who came out of the Friday the 13th franchise. When you look at Crispin Glover, when you look at Kevin Bacon, there are some great people and Amy Steele that we were talking about earlier. But I wanted this movie I wanted everyone to come out of this movie and have careers.
Well, I was, for a film to really resonate, like there's a lot of slasher movies and horror movies I love, but you and I have to admit, you take the horror away, there's really not much left there.
Right.
But the ones that really last and that you care about, again, like Jamie Lee Curtis and Laurie
Yeah.
Strode. You remember that person,
Yeah.
that character. It doesn't matter if Michael Myers is in that movie.
Absolutely.
I would
Look,
watch.
you look at the Scream franchise, and you also
Bet.
see, like, talk about acting talent in that film. I mean, but again, I think the fact that Wes was the filmmaker who desperately wanted to make Music of the Heart.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that he's the guy who wanted to make Serpent in the Rainbow. He's a guy who wanted to make films with great actors, and he
Yeah.
did consistently. He treated horror with the same respect that he treated a Meryl Streep movie.
Yeah.
That's what they deserve. That's what horror movies deserve, and what the audience for horror movies deserve is great performances.
Well, is talked about a little bit earlier, but I think people just assume, especially when I was a kid, oh, well, if you're seeing a horror movie, it has to be teenagers. But I remember growing up with movies like The Fog and Omen and all that, where I could identify with adult characters. So I love about this, A New Nightmare, and this thing is, you don't look down on kids like, I can watch a movie about adults. And
Right. This idea that children can only watch
Yeah.
movies about themselves is so ridiculous. And also, there's also a sense that there's no, what are they aspiring to be? Like, once you're a teenager, that your teenagers are over, and now you're looking back at your heroes. I think it's more interesting to give them heroes to look forward to becoming.
Absolutely.
So I think that's kind of what happens in this. I hope. But look, I think this idea of the teenage horror movie. What happened was Halloween was so massively successful that suddenly slasher films were, you have to get a bunch of teenagers, kill a bunch of teenagers. By the way, look, there's also something titillating about the idea of nudity and the first time they have sex and blah, 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 all that stuff that's attached to this. For me, I always joke about, these films, the Christian right was always so against these movies. They were always kind of coming after them. And I always thought, you're really knuckleheaded, because these movies could not be more Christian right.
Yeah.
Like, everyone who does a naughty thing gets to go to hell immediately. They are torn asunder because of their indiscretions. And this movie, again, I wanted it to be unique in that, the kids that have sex in this movie, they don't die because they have sex. They die because they choose not to use a condom. By the way, it was the first movie to do that.
Yeah.
We were the first one to do that bit. And the idea that if you choose to have unsafe sex, yeah, you're probably going to die. So there you go.
And I know, no one knows what's going to happen in the future, but today with Marvel movies and expanded universes and comic books and everything, a movie just doesn't exist. It has to be connected to a larger universe.
Yes.
I mean, was there any awareness on your part about expanding the mythology and hoping or connecting, was there any other influences?
Big time. Big time. Look, again, like I said earlier, I was not just the child of Friday the 13th movies. My scope was, I was a fan of all horror. And by the way, all movies. I'm a cinephile. Like you're sitting in my home right now, and you are surrounded by 20,000
Yes.
films. So I'm that guy. I wanted. Look, for me, whenever I would watch, let's say, when you'd watch Scooby-Doo, right, as a kid, and Batman showed up. Okay, that was the coolest episode of Scooby-Doo ever. Like, wait a minute, Batman knows Scooby-Doo? Okay? Or the Three Stooges, or like anytime, when Abbott and Costello met Frankenstein, when I was maybe 3 or 4 the first time I saw that film, I was so like, that gave me such love, not just for Abbott and Costello, but for Frankenstein, and they lived in the same world. And so for my imagination, all of these stories could live in the same world. And look, yes, there's the obvious Freddy, connection at the end of the movie, which, by the way, was my idea. That was not New Line dictating that. That wasn't Sean dictating that. That came out of conversations about all of the connections I was going to make in this movie to other franchises. Most specifically, The Evil Dead. When I was a kid, when that movie first came out, I was 13 and desperate to see the movie. I'd heard about it in Fangoria. There was all this buzz about the movie, but I lived in Connecticut at the time, and I had a friend in New York City where my father lived who could get me a bootleg copy of the movie on VHS. And I mean, it was so ugly and torn up. It was a terrible version of the movie, which only made the movie scarier, by the way. By the way, this is the proof positive that I was 23 when I directed this movie, because I just put the baby in a box. The baby is in a Del Monte Peaches box.
Baby Stephanie, right?
That is all. By the way, but Baby Stephanie, look, Brooke, who played this in the movie, Brooke Sher, she is so such a remarkable young lady, like beautiful girl, but whip smart, terrific young lady. The fact that she turned out so well, I'm going to take some credit on that for scaring the crap out of her before she was 6 months old. No, by the way, this is my second favorite movie, my second favorite scene of the movie.
I don't know if you remember.
Quiet little scene.
I think this is correct. When we did the launch party for Crystal Lake Memories, the book,
Yeah.
Dan and Jeff, who put all the party together, got in touch with baby Stephanie because I don't think you guys had seen her.
We
and
hadn't.
and the joke was like, let's bring baby Stephanie on you guys.
Yes.
'Cause you guys
Yes.
used to joke about, oh, you probably warped this poor girl for life.
Right. Nope. She is a stunning, amazing human being.
I remember that.
So I feel very, very happy about her developmental process and me scaring the crap out of her. But I do love that scene because it's you talked earlier about, people with real problems and real people in this story. That right there is an example of exactly what I was trying to do. However, getting back to the universe building, look, in that front yard right there, that jungle gym is from the movie The Birds. And Universal gave me the jungle gym, and then I had the prop master weld a bird to the top of that jungle gym so that I would be calling to attention, this is from The Birds. By the way, Tippi Hedren auditioned for me to play Erin Gray's part.
Really?
Yes, she did.
Wow.
Yes, she did.
That would be a tough choice.
It was a tough choice. It really was, because Tippi was amazing. She was a lovely woman too. So here's the thing. You're about to come into the Necronomicon in a second, which is the first big step into the Evil Dead franchise here. I wanted desperately to come up with, why is Jason like he is? I cannot go with the mythology of boy drowns in a lake. 30 years later, he's the same boy coming out of that lake to attack Alice. That doesn't make any sense to me. If it's that, then it's magical. There's an element of magic, because between the first movie and the second movie, which is what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks between those two movies? The opening, I'm saying, the very opening.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
They never really said it, but it seemed maybe 3 months at most.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somehow that boy has grown 2 feet, has gotten some clothes that fit him pretty well, has gotten a driver's license.
He used a phone. too.
He's figured out a lot of stuff. He's figured out how to use the Yellow Pages, and he has tracked Alice down, brought his mom's head with him, by the way, tracked Alice down, murdered her, and then taken Alice's body with him back to camp to put in the shrine, because Alice's body is laying there in front of the shrine at the end of the movie. So if you're going to tell me that that's what this movie is, fine. Then I'm going to tell you that's no longer a person, that's a monster. Well, how did he become a monster? So then you start saying, okay, now we got to go to Pamela. If Pamela's whole reason for being is her Jason, is her love for her Jason, and she leaves her family, she leaves everything behind over her obsession about this little boy, okay, which I buy, which I love. I love that story. It's almost Shakespearean in its agony. Then great. Then why couldn't she make a deal with the devil? Why couldn't she make a deal with the darkness and read from the Necronomicon to bring her little Jason back?
It makes sense with Part 6 as well, because once you have the lightning bolt, we're in fantasy.
We're in Fantasyland. Yeah. So he's this monster who can't be destroyed, who grew 2 feet in 3 months. Then he's a zombie. Then he goes up against Telekinesis Girl, takes a boat ride, but somehow the Necronomicon is a bridge too far for certain fans. Also, I wanted the dagger as well to be the thing that could actually take him down. So all of this mythology I wanted from the Evil Dead. I asked Sam Raimi if we could use the Book of the Dead. This happened because I was on set. The first time I actually hung out with Bob and the guys from K&B was on the set of Army of Darkness. So I was on set with them for that. And that's when I said to Bob, Bob, do you think Sam would let me have the Necronomicon for the movie? And he's like, I can ask. And he did. And Sam gave me the Necronomicon, I swear to God, in a Ziploc bag. Here you go.
Wow.
And that's why it appears.
You still have it? No.
I do not. No, we had to give it back. We did have to give it back. Which is funny because when you consider that when I got the glove from New Line, it came in a locked wooden box with a guy who brought it, and the minute we were done, put it back in the box and walked off with it. So very different approaches to how they dealt with the property on this film.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Oh, it's also fair to say, I mean, this era, people, just critics of the movie and expanding the universe and all that. But look at Nightmare on Elm Street. Look at even Halloween with the Man in Black and all
Yes.
that. I mean, this was just the era of you kind of had to move it out and expand it out, and
Absolutely.
everyone else was doing it. I mean, it's weird that people focus on this movie only and
Well,
give us such
it's interesting because Halloween 5, I think it's Halloween 5 or Halloween, which one's Paul Rudd? I'm sorry.
6.
6.
Yeah.
Halloween 6, the author of Halloween 6 wrote Dean and I a fan letter about Jason Goes to Hell.
Oh, really?
Then we go to see Halloween 6, which came out after
Yeah,
this, and I was like, oh, look at that. That's a lot of scenes from our movie are in this movie, including the nasty news guy who gets murdered for trying to set up a thing for ratings. I was like, oh, I've seen that plot device used. Where did I see that from? By the way, okay, come on.
Yeah, here's some. Yeah.
Come on. How do you not love a Friday the 13th movie with a melting
Yeah.
nude? Come on. Come on. By the way, this is when the K&B guys gave me my own, they gave me this belt with 2 saddlebags on it. And one saddlebag was filled with blood and the other one was filled with pus. And I had 2 ladles so that I could help dress the set. Because I kept asking for more blood. So Howard Berger was like, God, I'm just going to give you blood. You do whatever you want with the blood. So I would literally walk around slapping stuff with blood for that scene. Sam Raimi also did stuff like this, like Freddy's glove in The Evil Dead 2, but also, Sam Raimi and Wes both complementing each other, whether it's Hills Have Eyes or Evil Dead showing up in the Nightmare series. You've got, look, I think horror filmmakers in general, Mick Garris does this a lot, there's an honoring of each other. Like, we're all so in love with each other's work that we're constantly trying to somehow give each other props for going like, no, I'm inspired by what you do. I'm gonna talk about that here. The fact that the crate from Creepshow shows up in this movie, which is my great love of George Romero, who is one of my favorite filmmakers and also one of the greatest souls to ever work in our industry. There's constant reference to other characters. The fact that the sheriff is Sheriff Landis is my love of John Landis. And look, by the way, John Landis, probably more than almost any other filmmaker. And it's funny because Sean Cunningham used to say this about me. He was like, I feel like you're going to be John Landis. That was actually how he perceived me, because I was all about having this sense of humor. I was all about this sort of like this gallows humor along with all of this horror, So that was saying it was Sheriff Landis was so important. The fact that it's Cunningham County is my little rib to, is my little shove at Sean. And of course, Sean, because turnabout is fair play, Sean was the one who named Agent Marcus Agent Marcus. I did not do that. Sean went to Jimmy Gleason, who says that thing about nice shooting, Mahoney. Hey Marcus, clean this up. He's the one who told her to. He said call her Agent Marcus. Which, by the way, having Julie Michaels as as my family now, I'm all good with that.
Well, it's interesting. Kevin Williamson said something after Scream came out that at a certain point you have to have the whole idea of intertextuality, referencing other films. Yes. At a certain point, you have to acknowledge that the audience and the people in the movies are current with what's going on in the world, and they've seen other horror movies.
Right.
They can't stay in a vacuum forever. It's not 1980 still.
Right.
So.
Well, and by the way, that depends. I mean,
not you want to overdo it, but.
Well, and look, and Ken Williamson's entire oeuvre is based on that concept, which is awesome. And I'm a Scream fan, but here's the thing. I think the problem with Scream in particular is that I think it changed the audience's perception of it in saying, now no one can be ignorant of horror movies. Now we all know that.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, wait a second, no. You can also have a universe that doesn't have all of these movies, or a universe that is all of these movies, and they have other horror films that they watch that don't have the same rules that we have. So for me, I wanted this to be like a Universal monster movie. Like, I wanted there to be this great roadmap to all the other slashers. So I tried to put in as many references as I possibly could. And I have ever since, in all of my filmmaking, even in Texas Chainsaw, we kept trying to pepper in these little nuggets that connect the world. More and more I'm seeing people say, well, it's kind of a great movie. It's just not a great Friday movie.
You get,
okay.
you get that with Halloween 3 as well, you know.
Right,
that kind of thing.
right. And with Halloween 3, it's so silly because it's really what John Carpenter wanted the series to be, which is movies about Halloween. He didn't want it to be a Michael Myers thing. By the way, it's also why I think Sean wanted me to get rid of the mask, because I think that mask was for Sean. You know, when I first worked with Sean, I asked him, you know, what do you want to do? Because he was always asking me what I want to do with my career. And I said, what do you want to do with your career? And he says, I want to win an Academy Award. And I was like, wow, that's okay. That's a big ask for the guy who made Friday the 13th. But I thought it was really cool that he wanted that. I think the mask was a cage for Sean. I get why he wanted to get rid of it. I also get that, you know, it is the thing that has made him a very rich man. And I understand not wanting to, the being afraid of making the fans feel like he turned on them in some way. The truth is, blowing up Jason at the beginning of this movie was not turning on the fans. It was actually to turn on the fans. I wanted them to have something new. So I'm proud of the movie. Still am. Still proud of this stupid, ridiculous, over-the-top, crazy piece of filmmaking. Oh, and there I am. That's me. That's a 23-year-old.
So young. Wow.
That is me directing this movie while being in the movie.
This isn't always talked about a lot, but talk about a little bit about production design and just the look of the film. Do you have any influences and the feel you wanted to create?
Brooke Wheeler was the production designer on the movie. And Brooke, by the way, his father was one of the production designers of Gone with the Wind.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we had royalty on this movie. Brooke was quite brilliant. I worked probably for about 6 months in production design before we shot the movie. So everything, including the car that just drove up, like everything had to be authentic to... I was really trying to make it more Connecticut than New Jersey, mostly because that's where I grew up and where Sean grew up. Sean and I both grew up in the same town, Westport, Connecticut, our whole lives. And so I was trying to connect it to a lot of that. But look, the movie has a very specific palette. There's also, you know, the movie in its own way is a little candy colored. Like I wanted there to be this sort of Americana backdrop. It's why he's in red, white, and blue the whole time. Why Steven's in red, white, and blue. I wanted there to be all of this color because Jason is so devoid of color. Again, the shark in the water. The greatness of Jaws, let's say, is that town is a town you recognize. It looks like this sort of picturesque, perfect villa that suddenly is destroyed by this monster. I wanted to give this movie that same flair. So there was a real adherence to, I wanted it to look like a real place, but I did want it to have this heightened sense of color. And again, Bill Dill, you know, look at that. I mean, that shot right there, that's a beautiful piece of photography. And back then, that was not an easy piece of photography to pull off, to go from his hand. You know, this is back when we didn't have the same tools that we have now. This movie shot on 35 millimeter. Oh, I'm about to do my first stunt in the movie, of which I did many. And there I go.
Nice. Slow-mo.
That was actually fun because Bill Dill had to call the shot.
Is that a split diopter? Yeah.
That, by the way, is
Brian De Palma?
That is my Brian De Palma reference. I worked for Brian in New York.
Yeah.
When I got out of college. Brian is Brian's one of my top filmmaking heroes, but also he taught me so much about when I worked with him, which was only for a short time on Buying Fire of the Vanities. He really was so much about stretching tension. And that's what I really learned from Brian. And so, no, I had.
Is that where some of the slow mo come? The idea.
Absolutely,
yes.
absolutely. That's between Brian and John Woo. The funny thing is, the night before I did my director's test for this movie, I was John Woo's guest at the Orion Building for the first screening of Hard Boiled in America. When it was being shown to the executives. And I got to meet John, and I hung out with John for a little bit because K&B was doing his first American film, Hard Target. And so we all went out Laserdisc shopping together. John Woo actually bought me a couple Laserdiscs. Wow. I was 22 at the time. And so John also influenced a lot of that slow-mo stuff and a lot of what happens in that diner sequence. But no, Brian's the granddaddy. Brian's, you know, he's...
Well, it's interesting too. From I can hope not sound too pretentious, but
no, please.
From a storytelling and conceptual perspective, this is where everything converges. All the characters in the diner converge, and then it just goes kind of crazy and a lot of
Yes.
people get killed off.
Yep.
That was always intentional.
Absolutely.
That's definitely more of an action movie than a slasher movie.
Oh yeah. And again, you know, it was interesting because Mike DeLuca, who was my executive on this movie, when he was interviewed for Cinefantastique, he said this movie is less a Friday 13th movie and more the Terminator. And he made a couple references to me being more James Cameron like. In just a style sense, in that I wanted this movie. Look, I mean, how many guns are in this diner? It's so many guns. You know, good food and guns. But there is something about ratcheting this thing up. And again, I wanted Jason to have to go up against what was ostensibly an army. Like the beginning of the movie, I have a SWAT team blow him up. How do I, you know, it's sort of the Scream thing, right? How does Scream recover from having one of the best pre-credit sequences in the history of movie making? It's tough. It's tough to make that, it's tough to make the ending more exciting than the beginning. That was the idea with this. How do I keep ratcheting up the tension, and how do I make it so that the monster has a bigger mountain to climb? You know? And the fact that all these people are pretty adept at being able to shoot things, and that they're all somewhat, you know, kind of nuts. I mean,
Yeah, I
right
love that.
there, like,
Yeah.
you don't see that in a Friday 13th movie.
Yeah.
That's not a Friday 13th shot, you know? Also, the kind of comedy that comes out of a moment like that, you know? Also, it's a nod to the fact that she's going to get her head busted in. By the way, that
Yeah.
that was that girl right there who's screaming was my brother's ex-girlfriend at the time. And she needed her SAG card, so we let her scream, and we got her a SAG card. But that death, Adam Craner's death, you know, that was one of the first kills that I wrote for the movie. Was I wanted to see a compound fracture. We had not seen something like that up until that point, except for Deliverance. And I remember when I saw it in Deliverance, it bothered me so much when you see that compound fracture that I was like, I want to see that fracture happen. And it freaked people out. By the way,
I think there's something about it. It just makes you wince because like it's something physical.
it tears through that skin, man. It just
It's like the back break and
Okay, how badass is Alison Smith in that moment? Come on, man. I mean, that's Sarah Connor all day long. She's just a badass.
And it's a shame because people just don't talk about her. Even Friday 13th fans, she's just not mentioned.
She's not mentioned.
I don't know why.
And isn't that
Yeah.
crazy? Because for my money, she's one of the best. She's one of the best. Not only, you know, not just because she's beautiful, which she is beautiful, but she's so badass. It's just such a cool character, and she's also loyal and lovely to her best friend, and all of those things you would think, but you know, nope.
That, in terms of just technically shooting in slow motion, is it hard to make things not become lethargic really quickly? I would imagine that for a 23-year-old filmmaker, it was certainly a learning experience.
The idea behind it was I shot things very specifically for slow motion. I was very direct about what stuff was going to be slow mo. And back then you couldn't shoot with 5 different cameras. So in this sequence in particular, it was about I want to take the cool moments, the moments of character cool, and slow them down. Because the audience can be so busy going, ooh, you know, like this is a perfect example. When she grabs this thing and she spins it around. I mean, come on. That's just badass. So for me, immediately going from a slow motion shot to something that's normal motion doesn't allow for a slowdown in the storytelling. It keeps things moving. So it was all about taking those little singular moments and slowing them down.
Yeah.
That was a crazy thing because Allison started crying hysterically during that. Yeah. And I was worried that I stopped it because I thought we were hurting her. We weren't. She had hurt her arm when she came in to audition for me. She had a cast on because she had broken a dish while washing dishes, and she cut her whole arm up. It was really bad, and she almost bled out. She almost died. Wow. I mean, her boyfriend had to rush her to the hospital. It was really bad. And so when the blood started when we put it in her mouth and she spit it out, when she spit the blood out, she saw it on her hands and her body, and it started freaking her out. And she started having this whole PTSD thing from what happened to her earlier. So all the emotion in that scene is very real because it's coming from this real place for her. And it was amazing because I was like, are you okay? And she's like, no, let me keep going, let me go. And she was such a good actress that she knows, I'm tapping into something, I'll just go with it. But afterwards, man, oh, by the way, that's my Bob Fosse shot.
Yeah. That's what I
That's
say
literally
that.
what it is. All That Jazz is my favorite movie. That is my All That Jazz shot. It's also my Lenny shot. But it's you gotta love when someone leaves a note
Yeah, I
just
know.
to get you to the next place. That is some lazy
Machete.
writing. That's some
No
lazy
way.
writing. But no, we again, with the actors, there was a trust that was built up enough that they knew I would get them out of anything if it was too uncomfortable, and they were willing to go to an uncomfortable place for a Friday the 13th movie. It's kind of amazing.
So I should ask you about the whole conceit of the 22 frames per second.
Ah, yes.
If you,
Of course.
Sean's idea, right?
Sean's genius.
Because I've never heard of that employed in a full length.
He'd only done it once before. He did it for Deep Star 6. Deep Star 6 was the guinea pig on this. And if you watch the genius that is Deep Star 6, Nia Peebles has a monologue in the movie, dead center of the film. It's sort of the Von Helsing scene. Nia Peebles is a terrific actress. She speaks rather quickly, naturally. She delivers quickly. If you watch that scene in that movie, you're like, okay, is she a robot? Like, what does she do? It's like the Micro Machines commercials. Okay, she's like John Machida all of a sudden. It's because she shot at 22 frames per second. So what the idea is, Sean's idea behind this, and this was his quote unquote to me, no actor can do anything without having to emote it. So if they can't move quick, if I want them to go to a door, they have to know why. Why am I going to the door? What I usually tell them is your paycheck is on the other side of the door. So that's my Sean Cunningham impression. So he felt that no actor worked quick enough. Okay, that was what he told me. Okay, not really why he was doing it. Here's the thing. For all of Sean's quirks, he is a brilliant producer. Always has been. He is a remarkable producer. And what he figured out was, we shoot at 22 frames per second. I just cut 10% of my processing, of my film costs. I'm 10% under all that. And by the way, back then, 35 millimeter film was expensive. Processing was expensive. He just cut 10% of that budget and gave me all that money to put on screen. And he really did give me that money to put on screen. This movie was made ultimately for $2.5 million.
Wow.
Okay? Right. And most people don't know that. And it gets me crazy when people... I actually
That
had-
budget's lower than a lot of the other Friday the 13th
Oh, I
movies,
know.
so-
And those movies were made earlier, and they had more money. So this movie, once rights and everything else were paid for, we were about $2.5 million to shoot the movie. I had 37 days to shoot this movie in Los Angeles. That's
tax
because
breaks, yeah.
Sean is great at what Sean does. However, shooting at 22 frames per second is a nightmare for the DP.
Because we should probably explain it. If you shoot 22 frames a second, it's lower than 24, so everything goes a little bit faster. Right?
Everything's faster, which means it goes to the camera quicker, which means you have to open up the lens more to allow light in to affect that piece of film for a longer period of time. Okay? So Bill Dill, the entire time, I felt so bad for him. I was surprised he didn't pull an abacus out of his bag because he was constantly having to do the math on what the f-stop, how it would change for this tiny change in the speed. And it was a tiny change. Look, when you do slow motion, those things are already built in. Like, you know how much more your f-stop has to be. But not for 2 frames per second. That's crazy making. So Bill was constantly trying to figure out how to make this work. The other thing is, from a sound standpoint, it actually drops exactly 1 octave. So you're dropping all of the sound 1 octave, and suddenly it sounds normal again. So it's because everything gets kind of sped up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. But I mean, did it mess you up at all in terms of your movie was shorter, or because I think the original cut was a little bit shorter than even was it 78 minutes or
Oh
something?
God, no,
it
not
wasn't?
this movie.
Okay.
No.
Can't remember.
This film was way longer.
Oh, wait,
this
okay,
movie
okay.
came in well over 2 hours.
Oh my God.
Oh no, it was a nightmare. No, it was boring and awful. It was it was a terrible movie. It was terrible.
Well, maybe you should just throw in a few of the things that got cut or subcuts.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Look,
We don't have
there's a
all
lot
that
of stuff that got cut that was just dull, and a lot of sequences that just had too much air in them, and that David Hanman went back in and really stripped a lot of the air out, which made all
Yeah.
the difference. There are sequences in this film that are missing that I think would make it an even better film. There are performances that are shredded a little bit. I mentioned earlier Jonathan Penner. I think that sequence is terrific. It's one more chance to spend a little more time with Vicky, which I think would have helped her to gain a little more status in the fans' eyes. There's more explanation around Steven and Randy and their friendship. There's actually a scene where they make a prank phone call from the diner. And the scene goes on too long. It needed to be trimmed. But it was a fun scene in the way that it was built. Because, it made you care about these characters. And you saw there's a group of friends that were tight. That you love those people, including Ward, who works at the diner. So you see all those friendships develop. And then when they pay off, it's even sweeter, for my money. This whole sequence was way longer. The whole Voorhees house sequence. There was another demon, a full-size demon. We had a wonderful actor who had lost his legs, who played the demon in the sequence, and did an absolutely astonishing job. And the makeup was incredible.
Yes.
There it is. There's
Julia
Creepshow.
Carpenter.
There is Creepshow. And I love that people think it's a John Carpenter reference,
Yeah.
but it is not. It is a George Romero reference. So there's a ton of stuff. The one loss that we had. Oh my God! There it is. There it is.
Yeah, I know Aaron wasn't a big fan of that.
I'm not a big fan of it either, and it was not my choice. That was not something I wanted in the movie. It's something that was added to the movie because people were confused by it, and so we literally gave them a roadmap to it. Look. I know there are a lot of fans who are really freaked out by that moment, which is not a bad thing. It's a horror movie, and it is horrific. Yeah. By the way, that's the legs of our costume designer, who ended up becoming Greg's wife.
Oh, there you go.
That's her legs.
Jason.
So, and there it is. There's the big moment, and the fans go absolutely out of their minds. You would think all would be forgiven. It was not. But here's the thing. The Aaron Gray thing, it was one of those moments that just made me feel dirty and bad. And I was like, I almost felt like now I'm going to be blamed for losing the trust that I somehow betrayed this, and I didn't. This was a studio note. It's what we had to do. And, there are sometimes things that are distasteful that make a movie easier to understand what the hell's going on.
And I think people don't realize the studio, what the whole development process is like in studio notes. I don't think people realize how many there are and how many voices there are. And, and you don't just get to do what you want.
And especially once the movie's screened and people are confused by something, and the studio comes in and goes, "You're going to do this because you're going to make sure that they understand what the hell's going on." How
do you feel about the test screening process as a filmmaker? I mean, I know it can be helpful, but
I think it's incredibly helpful. I also think you have to have a thick skin and understand that not every note is an important note to change the movie to. That being said, look, I think we've lost our way a little bit as filmmakers in entire because we're forgetting the audience a little bit. There's two types of films that get made now. There's movies by committee, which I totally understand those movies because those are usually big budget films. There's so much money at stake. They have to protect that film. I get that. Then there's movies made by artistes or critical favorites. And look, you're not making... I love when people say, make the movie you want to make. Make the movie for you. I'm like, well, that's great, but that's completely masturbatory. So I'm a filmmaker who wants to make movies for an audience. Do I want to challenge my audience? Hell yeah, every time. But do I also want my audience to have a good time and walk out of the theater feeling satisfied? Yeah, of course I do. I don't understand making a movie that... I don't understand any filmmaker who doesn't want to hear criticism, especially in the early stages, so when you have a chance to make the movie better.
Especially if it's something that's artistic, it's more just a coherency issue.
Absolutely.
I didn't get that.
Right.
Yeah.
If people are confused, you have a problem. Yeah. And so all the confusion issues, we were like, let's fix that. So I do understand that. The one with Aaron was distasteful, and it's a shame.
So what was it like shooting this whole big act? This is the...
I actually shot this sequence on my 24th birthday, on the night of my 24th birthday. And it was so spectacular.
Yeah,
I'm shooting on location. It's just this. It was such madness, and Kane was having the time of his life. He's having the biggest fight Jason had in any of the movies. There's no hand-to-hand combat like this scene, and we were just, there is something to the fact that I was, 23 turning 24 on this night. I was brave. I was so unafraid to do stuff that was a little nuts and wacky.
Totally.
And also, look, you're giving these two actors a chance to be action heroes. They're beating the shit out of Jason Voorhees hand to hand. So
was there ever any talk about unmasking him? Because I think this is the only Jason movie you don't ever see underneath the mask.
we were never going to see it, and I'll tell you why. That's actually a quote that came from Sean Cunningham when we started the process, which was, he said to me, the minute you see the face of fear, it's no longer scary. And I looked at him and I was like, that's brilliant, man. Like, that's awesome. I couldn't agree more. Every time they took Jason's mask off, you had some version of this duh thing. And I was like, oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah,
I'm so frightened of that. It's almost like the joke in South Park, like you take the mask off, it's just Timmy.
Yeah.
And I'm
Jason.
like, no, how about we keep him just scary? That mask is what, because we're worried about what's behind the mask. When you look at, let's say, Nightmare on Elm Street, it's the burned skin that is the mask. So you're never really behind the mask, So I'm a look. Unless you're going to give me Phantom of the Opera, nothing under the mask is going to be more frightening than what the mask is. So let me just have the mask. Also, the idea that the skin had truly been encroaching on the mask itself and adhering it to be part of the face. That's why I did that. By the way, there is a little mask right there in the dots.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's Al.
Was there other talk about other ways to send him to hell? Was this always the concept?
This was it.
Yeah.
This was it. And in fact, the first storyboards of it are still my favorite storyboards ever done for any film that I've made. I love the storyboards for this film. That's about who was actually the storyboards were done by a wonderful director of animation who did The Simpsons, who was a big Simpsons director. Yes.
I think you actually gave me. I have photocopies of all the storyboards.
Yeah. And by the way, there was a joke version of this shot where I went running the other direction dressed in my cop uniform, which of course
Outtakes.
I don't know who has that anymore, but I did it because I was the only guy in town left alive because Creighton knocked me out, so I couldn't actually be killed, and it was just the Bish the cop running from Crystal Lake.
It's like the precursor to me Avengers and things and all the mashup movies like you guys.
Yes.
I mean, I understand Freddie Rich Jason was supposed to come out, but
Right.
Yeah, this is the first movie I can think of where you really did
Went
something
for
like
it.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you had the
again,
dog from Nightmare on Elm Street 4 pissing on him. Just kidding. No.
That is Jessica Cunningham's dog.
Oh,
That's Sean's daughter. It's her dog, Tango. We put a piece of hot dog under the mask, and Tango went for it immediately. We called Tango offset with a bigger piece of hot dog and ran off. We only shot it twice. We only did 2 takes. That's it. And
that's Kane's hand, right?
That's Kane's hand as Jason. He plays 3 characters in this movie. And look, when we got that shot, and we were actually shooting that shot, and we shot that on stage. You've never seen a group of people more excited or happy. I was like, we're closing the movie with cinema history.
Yeah. I remember the audience going crazy.
It was dude, on the very first test screening, when we got notes to fix things, people went out of their minds. By the way, the typeface is a nod to John Carpenter.
And say the Carpenter font people call it. Yeah. So, do you think these characters? I mean, as a director, did you want to revisit these characters? Or do you think they lived on, or they could come back in another Friday?
I did. I actually look for my money. The pitch that I had for Freddy versus Jason included Creighton Duke in a big way. Elizabeth Hill, there's Dean Laurie's wife. So I really wanted Julie. There's Julie, who was Greg's ex-wife. So I really wanted there to be this. I wanted you to care about the heroes as much as you cared about the villain. That was the trick with the movie. Yeah. So and again, what's so frustrating, and John would have been great, still great casting for it. I really did want it to be Tommy Jarvis's story. You know, I want it to be the continuation of this guy who had been so obsessed with Jason for so long that he fucks up his whole life over it. And now he's just stuck. He's stuck in this town, in the town that Jason built. And he's got this baby mama drama and all this stuff. I wanted to see him grow up. So Stephen Freeman, for me, was a guy that that was the extension of Tommy Jarvis. And I wanted the audience to love him as much as they love Jason.
Well, it's interesting because there's so many fan films now, like Never Hike Alone
yeah.
and all that. It'd be interesting to see fans take this and do
It would be
something with
great.
it. Yeah.
I would love it, and I would sign off on it in a heartbeat.
Yeah. So,
By the way, Patrick Don Vito, our apprentice editor, was just nominated for Best Editor for Green Card.
really,
Just nominated for an Academy
you
Award.
mean Green Book or
Green Book? I'm
Oh,
sorry, not Green Card.
Okay.
Sorry, Green Book. Yes, the Gerard Depardieu movie
Yes.
from 20
Yeah,
years
that's
ago.
what I was thinking. Like, oh, okay.
No, for Green Book. For Green Book, yeah.
It's always hard to wrap up, but I mean, you know, what, 25 years later, I mean, where do you think, how does this film fit into, I guess, also not just your work, but the fighting franchise and horror history and
Look,
legacy?
from the standpoint of horror history, I think it's the movie that led to Freddy vs. Jason, which I think was important for the fan base. I think that it gave the Friday the 13th franchise a new route to drive down, to give it a new life. I think it's a shame that Jason X didn't follow that. I think sending anybody to space is what you do when the franchise is over. And I think that's a shame because I think there is life in this. I think there's a lot of life in this franchise.